Hey guys, it's Mike. Today is the first episode where I will be reviewing some fan music. I posted on social media that I want to start doing this show. I got a ton of submissions. Just for the record, no, it must be completely original. Also, please make sure it's as close to a studio quality recording as possible. If it's a live performance and it does not have a direct feed from the mixer, don't send it. By the way, thank you to everyone who sent in submissions. I'm gonna do my best to get through as much of it as I can before I take new submissions. Also, to anyone out there who thinks I'm gonna be going too hard and oh my gosh, how could you say this about your fans' work? My fans sent this in because they want my honest feedback. They may have watched one of my videos before and know how I treat these things. If I'm not being nice, it's not because I'm being a jerk trying to tear you down, it's because I'm taking you seriously. If you want someone to kiss your ass and pat you on the back, you can take it to your mom and dad, or your friend who doesn't know shit about music. That being said, no, I'm not going to rip them a new asshole. I reserve that for people who I don't think deserve the level of fame that they have. The Nihilist by Wretched Inferno. This is basically some European darkened thrash from what I can tell. Pretty basic bare bones stuff. I think the guitar tone could use a little bit of work, but it also, these frickin' lighting changes from the window are the worst. The guitar tone's pretty decent, could use a little bit of work. You can definitely tell that they have a specific style of metal that they listen to that they're trying to emulate very hard, but they're overcompensating. As with a lot of people who are new to mixing, new to recording, new to just trying to establish their sound, they don't glue things together really well. They're used to hearing like, okay, well, what do the drums sound like by themselves if I had to isolate it by listening to a track? Or what does this sound like by itself if I had to isolate it while listening to the track as a whole? You start to miss a little bit of the subtlety. You start to miss that certain frequencies from other instruments are impacting frequencies of other instruments and they blend together a certain way. This track kind of screams of that. Songwriting wise, I would say that your riffs are predictable. I pretty much know what's happening with the rhythm after the first riff, and melodically and harmonically, I would say the notes that you're choosing for the riffs are not very interesting. It's okay, don't sweat it. We all go through this. This is a thing that every guitar player, every songwriter does. Now, for those of you in the comment section being like, oh, but it's all about raw brutality and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, fine. It's about raw brutality and strictly about rhythm. Then why did they play any other notes besides zero? You know what song does this really well? Bleed by Meshuggah. It has a rhythm that repeats a ton. It basically is one note, and then every once in a while, that note gets bent upwards. That's it. Yeah, it's still able to punch you in the nuts every single time. This song didn't do that. So if you're not just gonna be playing zero the whole time and just absolutely smack me in the face with brutality, you're leaving some room for melody. So what are you saying with that melody? For those of you who want a refresher on melody, which by the way to this band I would highly recommend going and checking out this video, link to my video on melody in the description. You not only have to think of the pitches you are choosing for your melody, you have to think of the rhythm you're choosing for your melody. Making these repetitive can be really boring, but if you know how to articulate that melody correctly, it can actually make it interesting. Which brings me to the next part. The performance of the guitars is very sloppy. I understand some people think you can get away with this, and 99% of the cases you can't. Maybe you will appeal to a certain market that is okay with things just being raw, but if you're okay with things just being raw, then you're okay with not really going anywhere real quick. One of the things that I preach about a lot with bands is tightness. Tightness has to do with your performance to a metronome, or honestly, your performance with each other. You all have to basically lock in with the drummer. The drummer's drums sounded pretty fake, not gonna lie, but with the exception of a handful of beats, he sounded like he was pretty on. And there's no way you're going to get your brutality across any better than being tight as a damn drum. Anytime you're playing your riff and then you do a melodic rundown, which kind of transitions you to the next riff or the next part of a riff, that needs to be tight as nuts. The looser it is, the more garbled and muffled and muddy it sounds. Also really quick, let's talk about your mix. The kick mix is far too dominant. I'm not sure how you have it EQ'd, I'm not sure what samples you're using, that's 99% sure it's a sample. But it is far too high in the mix, it is obnoxiously overwhelming in the low end, which brings me to my next point: where's your bass? I can tell your bass is there, I can barely tell when it's absent, but your kick is absorbing so much of the lows and the low mids where your bass can really find a good home, and your guitars are super saturated in the mid-range. The bass is kind of left homeless. Your bass is incredibly scooped. I can definitely hear some of the growl up on the higher mid-range, and I can hear some of the coming in at about, I don't know, 150-ish to 200 maybe. Future Mike here. There's one thing I forgot to mention. From what I'm guessing, I don't think that you had a DI track for the bass, or if you did, you didn't mix it properly. When you're mixing hard rock, rock and roll, or metal bass, you want to have, especially this sounds like it's probably coming out of a rig, or it might be coming out of a virtual rig, you want to have one track that is just the raw bass signal going directly into your interface or preamp or whatever, and then you want one that's colored and distorted through your rig, your amplifier, whatever you have in your setup. You're gonna be able to get way more low-end clarity and punch and warmth out of your bass, as opposed to it being kind of smushed, compressed, and fuzzy as it's gonna be running through the rig. But it has no impact, which makes me believe it's probably over-compressed. You want the bass to find its home somewhere between 130 and 300. Are there positive things to say about this track? Very possibly yes. Again, go ask your friends about that. Or comment section, you can listen to their track listed below. You can tell them how great they are. Osiris by Orpheus. The mix feels a little dark in the drums and on the guitars. If I had to guess, it feels like you were trying to EQ some of that out in post. Maybe it's the way you recorded it, I'm not sure. The snare feels a smidgen narrow, which brings me back to, I think, my overall problem with the drum mix. I don't feel like there's a ton of room in that drum mix. If you know how to properly use a room mic in a drum mix, and you know how to properly compress it, you can get some excellent thud out of your kick and your low end. You can get some nice crackle and spice out of your higher end of your drums. It also seemed like the overheads you were using were focused mainly on the cymbals and not getting enough of the 1K to 4K range of your other drums. The overheads are not just for cymbals, they're also for your other drums. Again, I could be off base on this, but that's what I'm hearing. I'm not sure how else to interpret it. The kick is a tad clacky on the high end. That seems to be a really big thing for people when they first start doing mixes on metal drums, is they want that clack so it cuts through that smack. Might be just a tad much. One of the big things when it comes to mixing is a little goes a long way with EQ. The verse vocals I think are good. The chorus vocals definitely feels like the guy is struggling quite a bit on the high notes. Can't say I'm really big on the chorus lyrics either. They don't feel the most musical to me. They're not awful, I just think they could be better. All around, the melodies I would say are pretty good. Not much else for me to say on this one. If you want to go take a look at it, that will be the link in the description as well. I'm not pronouncing this. All I know is it's punk rock from Germany. The name will be somewhere on screen. Vocals are an absolute no. Ich geh über Leichen mit meinem harten Rohr. What in the actual hell are you doing with the kick side chain compression? As I've explained in other videos, side chain compression is when you have an instrument that you want to stick out over something else. It could be a group of instruments or one instrument in particular. In this case, they took the kick drum and side chained it to everything except for the vocals. So every time the kick drum hits, you feel a giant ooh happen to the rest of the instruments. Side chaining is used in a lot of mixing, but this type of super dramatic side chaining is almost never used, and the only time it really is in electronic music. Not only that, compression and punk really don't go great together, and you absolutely crushed the piss out of the compression on it. And I can tell it was side chaining compression and not the mix itself, because if it was the mix itself, the vocals also would have ducked and the vocals stood still. Like, that amount of sidechain compression was even a lot for most electronic music. Here's the light again, thank goodness. I will give you guys credit, that is a cool bass tone and a cool guitar tone. I'm typically not a huge fan of punk guitar tone, but that guitar and bass tone I think was cool. I'll be honest, the chorus hook is good. It got stuck in my head by the end of the song. Even though I freaking hate listening to you guys sing, I like the hook. Go ahead and take a look at that in the link in the description for yourself. Polaris by Alec. Now, I did not review this entire thing because frankly it's so close to unfinished and very clearly just a small scrap idea that it wasn't worth really going through. But what I did want to do is use this as an example of someone using melody appropriately in a riff, in quotes. All it is a B minor add 9 with the 7 in there, and then it goes right to B minor. But he uses the change in voicing from one chord to another melodically by using arpeggiation. For anyone who missed what I have described of what arpeggios are playing one note in a chord at a time. If you look at the way the B minor 9 with the 7 in it is voiced, it is voiced with the B minor 7 played straight out. Second from the top, we have the 5th of the chord, and then at the top, we have the 9, which if you look at chords the way that you would a scale, that would be the 2nd degree of the scale, but 9th because it's an octave at least above where the root of our chord is. Going from 5 to 9 is a perfect 5th, which is very pleasant to our ears. Then next, when we just do the B minor 7, he goes from the flat 7 to the tonic. So our first note 5 is now replaced by a flat 7, and our second note 9 is now replaced by the tonic, or our tonal center, our home, our first degree, if you will. Going from flat 7 to tonic is a major second movement, whereas we had a perfect 5th before. But going from flat 7 to tonic has a resolving type of feeling to it. If you look at it from a melodic perspective, it's interesting to see the two notes, the beginning and end of each of these destinations, get closer together from both directions. You have the preceding chord ending on a 9, which wants to naturally resolve to 1, which we do later in the next chord. It's a really simple idea that I just sat here and explained quote-unquote complicatedly, but really it's not that complicated. And it's something that this kid figured out naturally on his own. It's very pretty. And I think it's a great example of how you should think melodically about your riffs. A riff isn't just cool because it drives and it smacks and it's like ooh. A riff can also be cool because it makes your heart sing. So I'll have a link to that one in the description as well. That is it for this week of me reviewing your music. I would not send any submissions at this time because I already have way too many to sift through. Again, I do greatly appreciate everyone who did submit. If you like this video, if you like what I do in this channel, please like, please comment, please share. Please support me on Subscribestar. That is the only way I can keep making badass videos for you. Please follow my band Crusade. The links to our social medias in the description below. Single coming out in October and full release coming at the beginning of next year. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Become the Night. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next video. Rock on!